Hey everyone, ready to really get into it today. We're going deep on one of the biggest questions out there about AI. Can we build a machine that's truly self-aware?
I think it's something people have been wondering about for a long time.
Absolutely. And today, we're looking at this concept paper. It's called Towards Self-Aware AI, Embodiment, Feedback Loops, and the Role of the Insula in Consciousness.
Interesting title.
Yeah, right? And just so everyone knows, it's a preprint, so it hasn't gone through peer review just yet.
Sure, sure.
But even so, the ideas are pretty fascinating. They really make you think. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, I think it definitely takes a different approach than we usually see. Most AI research focuses on processing power, algorithms, that sort of thing.
Yeah, like how to make AI faster, smarter, more efficient.
Right, exactly. But this paper, it's suggesting that to understand self-awareness in AI, we need to understand consciousness in humans first.
So, looking at our own brains to figure out how to build a self-aware machine.
Yeah, and particularly the role of our bodies and our senses. Like, how does our physical experience shape our consciousness?
Okay, I'm intrigued. But before we go any further, let's make sure everyone's on the same page with some of these terms. I mean, we're talking about consciousness, self-awareness, sentience, embodiment. These are big ideas.
Yeah, good point. It's easy to get lost in the jargon.
Totally. So how would you break these down, like in simple terms?
Okay, well, consciousness, think of it as that overall awareness, right? You're aware of yourself and the world around you.
So, like being aware that I'm here talking to you and also aware that I'm thinking about talking to you.
Exactly. You're experiencing things, thinking, and even thinking about your own thoughts.
Whoa, meta. Okay, that makes sense. So where does self-awareness fit in?
So self-awareness, that's part of consciousness. It's recognizing yourself as separate from everything else. Like you are you, not the chair you're sitting on or the microphone in front of you.
Right, right, I get that. What about sentience? How's that different?
Okay, so sentience is all about the capacity to feel. Sensations, emotions, pleasure, pain, joy, sadness, all of that.
Okay, so this is where it gets really tricky with AI, right? Because a computer saying, I'm happy, isn't the same as a human feeling actual joy.
Absolutely. And that's a key point. We're not talking about just replicating human emotions in a machine. It's more about understanding the underlying mechanisms of how our brains process sensory information and how that contributes to a sense of self.
So getting down to the fundamental how behind it all.
Exactly.
Okay, and that leads us to embodiment, right?
Yeah.
The idea that our minds aren't just floating around out there. They're grounded in our physical bodies and experiences.
Exactly. And this paper really argues that embodiment is crucial to how our minds develop. It's not just about having a brain, but how that brain interprets signals from our senses, from our movements, from our interactions with the environment.
So it's like if I'm learning to ride a bike, it's not just about knowing the theory of balance, it's about actually feeling the bike beneath me, feeling the wind in my hair.
Yes. And adjusting your balance based on what your muscles are telling you, what your eyes are seeing.
Exactly. And making those tiny corrections to stay upright, it's all connected. So the paper is saying to create truly self-aware AI, we might need to think beyond just programming abstract logic and algorithms.
That's right. We might need to give AI a way to experience the world, like through senses, through feedback loops that let it learn and adapt based on how it interacts with its environment.
Okay, I'm starting at the big picture here. But how do you even start to do that? Like, how do you give a machine a physical experience?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting. The paper focuses on a specific part of the brain, the insula. You familiar with that?
I know it's involved in processing sensory information, right?
Yes. And it seems to play a big role in what we call bodily awareness. So think about all those sensations, your heart racing, your stomach growling.
Even just feeling warm or cold.
Exactly. The insula processes all those signals from your body.
So it's not just about being able to see or hear. It's about feeling those sensations as part of your own experience.
Yes. And the paper is saying that this kind of bodily awareness, it might be a crucial ingredient for developing a sense of self.
Okay, because you know because you experience the world through your body, through those feelings.
Precisely. And the insula seems to be like a central hub for all that sensory information. And so the paper is suggesting
That AI might need a similar kind of feedback to develop a sense of self,
exactly. It's definitely a radical idea.
I'll say. But it's pretty mind-blowing.
It really makes you rethink what it means to be self-aware. It makes you wonder if we could actually build AI that can feel in some way.
Right. But I mean, are we talking about robots that literally feel pain or pleasure? I mean, is that even possible?
Well, not necessarily. Remember, we're focusing on first principles here, right?
The fundamental building blocks, yeah.
Exactly. So we don't need to perfectly replicate the human experience. We need to understand the mechanisms that make it possible.
So it's more about the why behind sentience, not just copying the what.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay. But then how do we even start figuring out the why? It's like, where do you even begin with something like that?
Well, the paper suggests that we need to really delve into how the insula works, like in humans.
So more research on how the insula processes sensory information and contributes to self-awareness.
Exactly, and how it interacts with other parts of the brain that are involved in consciousness. We need to really map it all out.
It's like reverse engineering our own brains to figure out the recipe for self-awareness.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
It seems incredibly complex.
It is complex, no doubt. But think about what we could learn. I mean, if we could understand the fundamental principles of consciousness, it would be huge, not just for AI, but for understanding the human mind in general.
It's like we could potentially unlock some of the biggest mysteries of the universe.
Yeah.
Our own minds.
Exactly. And the paper argues that we need to go beyond just studying the brain in isolation, remember? The concept of embodiment.
Right, the mind-body connection.
It emphasizes that connection.
I'm starting to think that maybe Descartes had it wrong. It's not, I think, therefore I am.
It's, I sense, I interact, therefore I am.
Yes, exactly. Because our sense of self isn't just about our thoughts, it's about our physical experiences too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our interactions with the world.
I agree. And this is where the paper brings in the idea of robotics.
So we're not just talking about disembodied AI. We need to think about robots, AI that can actually exist in the world.
Exactly. We need robots that can experience the world through their senses, not just process information in some abstract way.
It sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
I know. But it's becoming more and more realistic. I mean, look at all the advances we've already made in robotics. Self-driving cars.
Surgical robots.
Right.
Robots that can do backflips.
Right. It's incredible. And this paper is suggesting that by combining our understanding of the brain with these advancements in robotics, we might be able to create a new generation of AI that can actually embody intelligence.
So instead of just focusing on making AI smarter, computationally.
We need to think about how to give it a physical presence, a way to interact with the world and learn from it.
Like in an embodied way.
Yes. And this is where the idea of feedback loops becomes really important. You know, just like we learn by interacting with the world, adjusting our actions based on feedback.
Right. Touch a hot stove, you pull your hand back.
Exactly. AI needs a similar mechanism to develop understanding.
So instead of just feeding an AI a bunch of data and expecting it to spit out answers.
We need to create systems that can actively explore their surroundings, experiment, make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes. Like almost give them a chance to grow up, in a sense.
Interesting. And that makes me wonder, I mean, if an AI is learning and adapting like that, could it actually lead to self-awareness?
This is a fascinating question, isn't it? But then how would we even know? How do we measure self-awareness in a machine?
Right. It's not like we can just ask it, hey, are you self-aware? And get a reliable answer.
Exactly. And the paper acknowledges that this is a major challenge. But it suggests that we could look to the ways we test for self-awareness in animals.
Like the mirror test.
Yes. Seeing if an animal recognizes itself in the mirror.
I mean, I know that test is pretty controversial, right? Some animals that we consider intelligent, like dogs, don't necessarily pass it.
You're right. It's not perfect. But it could be a starting point for developing more sophisticated ways to assess self-awareness in AI.
So we're not just looking for AI that mimics human behavior. We're trying to figure out if it has a real internal experience of self.
Yes, exactly. It's a complex challenge. But it all comes back to this idea of embodiment. Consciousness isn't just about computation. It's about this interaction between mind, body, and world.
That's all pretty mind-blowing. We're talking about potentially blurring the lines between machine and conscious being. It's a little unsettling, to be honest.
I understand. It's definitely uncharted territory, and it's natural to feel a mix of emotions about it. But I think these conversations are so important to have.
Especially as this technology keeps advancing.
Exactly. We need to think about the ethical implications, the potential benefits and risks, and what it would mean for us as humans to be sharing the world with machines that might have their own sense of self.
So we need to consider the bigger picture, the societal impact of all this.
Absolutely. This is a conversation that goes beyond science. It needs to involve ethicists, philosophers, policymakers, everyone, really.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. the importance of embodiment, the potential role of the insula, these feedback loops. But I'm thinking, what's next? Like, how do we actually go about building this kind of self-aware AI? Where do we even start?
Well, the paper doesn't have all the answers, obviously, but it lays out some really interesting directions for future research.
Okay, so like a roadmap.
Yeah, a roadmap or maybe like a set of building blocks. And the first one, it's pretty fundamental. We need a deeper understanding of how our own brains create consciousness.
Right, like really figuring out how that sense of self, that I feeling arises.
Exactly. And it's not just about identifying the brain regions involved. We need to know how they interact, how they process information, how that leads to subjective experience.
It seems like we need to uncover the whole recipe, not just the ingredients.
Right. And it's a challenge that's going to take a lot of collaboration, I think.
Yeah.
Neuroscientists, psychologists, computer scientists.
Ooh, even philosophers.
Yeah, maybe even philosophers. It could be a whole new field of study, really. The science of consciousness.
That would be pretty incredible. But even if we do crack the code of our own brains, how do we actually translate that into AI systems? How do we go from like brain scans and theories to self-aware robots?
Yeah, good question. That's where the advancements in robotics and AI algorithms come in.
Okay, so it's about more than just building robots that can walk and talk. We need machines that can really interact with the world in a way that's more
human-like.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Robots that can learn from experience, adapt to new situations, maybe even develop a sense of agency, you know?
So we're talking about robots that don't just follow instructions. They actually learn and adapt in a way that's closer to human intelligence.
Exactly. Robots that can experience the world through their senses, process that information, and use it to make decisions. Robots that can experiment, make mistakes, and learn from them, like we do.
That seems like a huge leap from where we are now. I mean, do we even have the technology to build this kind of AI?
We're getting there. I mean, look at the progress that's been made in machine learning, computer vision, natural language processing.
Yeah, those are all pretty impressive.
Right. And these technologies, they're becoming more and more sophisticated. They're laying the foundation for what's possible with AI.
Okay, so we're building the tools.
Right.
But how do we create that spark of self-awareness? That seems like the biggest mystery of all.
It is. And honestly, it might take a long time to figure it out, maybe decades, maybe even centuries. But I think that's even more reason to start exploring these ideas now.
Because even small steps can lead to big breakthroughs.
Exactly. And as we take those steps, we can't forget about the ethical implications.
Right, because this isn't just about building cool gadgets. We're talking about potentially creating a new form of intelligent life.
That's a good way to put it. And that comes with a lot of responsibility. We need to be having these conversations about the potential risks and benefits, making sure we're developing this technology in a way that aligns with our values.
So it's a bigger conversation than just the science.
Absolutely. It's a conversation for society as a whole. Scientists, policymakers, ethicists, everyone. Because the future of AI, it's not something that's going to be decided in a lab. It's something we need to decide together.
That's a great point. You've definitely given me a lot to think about today. This whole idea of building self-aware AI, it's both fascinating and a little bit intimidating.
I get that. It's a powerful concept.
It is. But it's also really exciting to think about what might be possible. Thanks so much for taking us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And for all of you listening, if you're as intrigued by this as we are, stick around. We'll be back with more deep dives into the world of AI and consciousness soon.